The Galactic Council gathered in a giant circular chamber where the walls seemed to glow with soft blue light. Representatives from dozens of species filled their seats, whispering among themselves in uneasy tones. Every meeting in that place was usually calm and controlled, but not this one. Something heavy hung in the air, and everyone could feel it. The subject of the day was Earth, and that alone was enough to make the room tense. For years the Council had watched humanity rise from a small, distant world to a powerful force among the stars. Humans were growing fast, learning fast, and exploring places most species had avoided for centuries. Some members admired them. Others feared them. A few even hated them, convinced that humans, unpredictable and emotional, would eventually disrupt the balance of the galaxy. And today, all those feelings were about to collide. The meeting began when the senior speaker, a tall being with shimmering plates across its body, struck the center podium. A low hum filled the air, signaling silence. All whispers stopped. The speaker announced that recent reports from outer sectors showed humans making large scientific leaps. Their ships were traveling faster. Their colonies were spreading farther. Their technology was becoming sharper than anyone predicted. And on top of everything, their scientists had begun studying dark matter waves, something the Council had once declared too dangerous for young species. The moment the speaker mentioned it, the whole chamber buzzed with panic again. One representative sharply clicked its mandibles, insisting humans were moving too fast. Another argued that humans were reckless. A third said that humans always acted with too much emotion and too little patience. The noise rose higher and higher until it almost drowned out the room. But in the middle of all that chaos, there were a few calmer voices representatives who argued that maybe the Council should talk to Earth instead of making secret decisions. They warned that acting behind humanity's back would cause mistrust. They said humans deserved fairness, but their voices were small compared to the loud fear around them. The senior speaker raised a hand, demanding order again. Then came the question that changed everything. Should the Council limit Earth's growth before humans became too strong? The entire chamber went cold hot. It was a dangerous question. It meant interfering with an independent species. It meant choosing control instead of cooperation. But the fear inside many members was stronger than caution. They imagined humans one day standing equal to them in power, and that thought alone made them nervous. Some species had trouble accepting how fast humans adapted to every challenge. Some felt uneasy about how humanity pushed forward even when others hesitated. Humans didn't slow down. Humans didn't wait for permission. And to many in the room, that was frightening. After long hours of arguing, the senior speaker finally called for a vote. Every member placed a hand, tentacle, fin, or metallic limb over their console. A soft chime echoed as the results appeared. The decision was made. The Council had voted to quietly restrict Earth's expansion by interfering with communication networks, slowing relay signals, and cutting off trade routes without admitting it. They wanted to weaken Earth's influence without starting a direct conflict. It was a secret plan, approved behind closed doors, with no humans present to defend themselves. As soon as the vote passed, some members felt a heavy guilt settle inside them. They knew this decision was unfair. They knew Earth didn't deserve to be treated like a threat, but they were too afraid to speak out. Most simply followed the majority, hoping the situation would never escalate beyond political pressure. Unfortunately for them, humans were not easy to deceive. Far away, in a small deep space monitoring outpost on the edge of human territory, two technicians noticed something odd. Their screens showed strange patterns in the communication, grid signals that were bending or breaking in ways they shouldn't. At first, they thought it was a malfunction. But the more they studied it, the more they realized the interference had a deliberate pattern. Something or someone was tampering with the relay routes humans relied on. The outpost sent its findings to Earth's Central Research Division. Analysts studied the data for hours, comparing every broken relay to known council traffic. When they connected all the pieces, they saw a pattern that pointed toward something larger and far more concerning. The interference wasn't random. It came from inside council-controlled sectors. Human leadership responded quietly. They didn't send angry messages. They didn't accuse anyone publicly. They didn't panic. Instead, they ordered a small team of experts to investigate further. This team included engineers, analysts, and observers who understood both human and alien technology. They worked in silence, digging deeper, tracing every signal back to its source. And week by week, the picture became clearer. The sabotage was real, and it was coordinated. Even though humans remained calm on the surface, tension brewed underneath. Scientists who depended on those communication routes became frustrated when their experiments stalled. Colonies located far from Earth lost contact for hours at a time. Cargo ships drifted without instructions, risking navigation through dangerous zones. People back home began to whisper among themselves, wondering why things were breaking down. Human leaders decided not to reveal the truth until they were absolutely sure. They knew that accusing the council without proof would cause conflict. They also knew that humanity, once angered, would not back down easily. So they waited, watched, and listened, letting their investigation continue quietly. Meanwhile, inside the Galactic Council, the situation was far more chaotic than they wanted to admit. Their plan to slow down humanity was creating unexpected complications. Some species felt guilty and tried to hide it. Some feared humans would discover the truth. Others believed the sabotage was not enough and demanded stronger measures. One representative nervously mentioned that humans were already detecting unusual signal behavior. The room fell silent. They all knew humans were good at solving problems quickly. They knew humans were curious, stubborn, and determined. If humanity started investigating, it was only a matter of time before they uncovered everything. This thought spread through the council like a cold wind. Many members began whispering to each other, asking if they should reverse the decision before it was too late. Others argued that doing so would make them look weak. A few insisted the plan would work if they stayed firm. But deep down, fear was building. They had underestimated humans before, and they were doing it again. Back on Earth, the investigation team discovered a critical piece of evidence, an encoded signal pulse that matched a frequency used only by Council-operated relay stations. This was the first concrete proof of interference originating from Council networks. It wasn't yet enough to make accusations, but it was more than enough to raise concern among human authority. The information was delivered to the Central Committee in a confidential report. After reading it, the committee members sat in a heavy silence. They understood the weight of what they were holding. If the Council was acting against humanity in secret, it meant trust between both sides was already broken. Humans didn't want conflict. They never wanted to start a war. But they also refused to be controlled or pushed down by fear-filled decisions made in hidden rooms. As word reached higher levels of Earth's leadership, preparations quietly began. They didn't mobilize armies or launch ships. They simply organized their intelligence, strengthened border scans, and alerted key scientific stations to stay cautious. Humans planned carefully, step by step, knowing they might soon need to defend themselves in a way they never expected. The Galactic Council, unaware of how close humanity was to uncovering everything, continued debating among themselves. Some voices pushed for stronger action. Some begged to stop the sabotage before it escalated. Some simply hoped the humans would remain unaware, but humans were many things curious, determined, observant, and there was one thing they were not. Blind. Behind the scenes. Both sides were preparing for a future neither wanted, but both feared. And as the council struggled with its growing guilt and rising panic, Earth watched with calm eyes, waiting for the moment the truth would finally break into the open. The quiet suspicion was slowly turning into something much bigger. And soon the whole galaxy would discover how serious the mistake truly was. The attack happened on a quiet rotation day, when the scientific team on the frontier station expected nothing more than routine readings and long hours of analysis. The outpost floated alone in a silent region of space, far from trade lanes, far from colonies, and far from anything that could cause trouble. That isolation was exactly why the team had chosen the place to study dark matter waves. They needed silence. They needed stability. They needed a place untouched by normal space traffic. No one expected a threat out there. Inside the station, 2 researchers were adjusting sensor panels, while others monitored energy patterns on their screens. The room was peaceful in the way only deep space could be. No outside noise, no disturbances, just the faint hum of the station's life support and the soft glow of monitors. Some crew joked lightly among themselves, trying to stay awake after long hours of data recording. It felt like any normal day. Then everything changed. A sudden alarm screamed through the station, sharp enough to cut through every casual thought. Lights flickered red. The floor trembled under everyone's feet. For a moment, no one understood what was happening. The station was in a secure region. There shouldn't have been any ships around. There shouldn't have been any danger. Before they could even react, a violent shock hit the outer hull. The station shook so hard that several crew members fell against the walls. Sparks burst from one of the ceiling panels. A scientist shouted over the noise, demanding a status report. But the systems were already failing too fast. When they finally pulled up an external visual feed, they froze in disbelief. A strange automated strike craft leak, metallic and unfamiliar, moved through the darkness, firing controlled bursts at the station. It wasn't large, but it was powerful. And it wasn't sending any signal, any warning, or any identification code. It came in silent and hit without hesitation. The crew scrambled to secure themselves, while trying to restore power to the shields. The station wasn't built for war. It was a research facility. It had basic defenses, nothing more. But still, the crew fought to keep the systems alive. A young technician pushed through smoke pouring from a damaged panel, coughing while trying to reroute energy lines. Another tried to seal a small breach that had opened at the far end of the lab. Every few seconds, another blast shook the station, rattling the metal walls and feeling like a giant fist slamming against the structure. Even though the crew managed to restore partial shields, they knew it wouldn't hold long. They managed to send a distress signal toward human command, but out there, communication always had delays. Help wouldn't arrive in time. As the automated craft lined up for another shot. The crew braced themselves. Then something unexpected happened. The strike craft's final blast hit the shield at an awkward angle, rebounded, and damaged its own systems. The craft began to tilt. Its engines flickered. For a moment, it spun out of control before drifting away from the station, its lights dying one by one until it floated, motionless in empty space. The attack was over, but the damage was done. Inside the station, several crew members were injured. One had been thrown across a console and lay on the floor, clutching their arm. Another had cuts from shattered display screens. Even those not hurt physically were stunned, shaken, and struggling to understand what had just happened. Why would anyone attack a peaceful scientific outpost far from everything? Medical units were activated. Alarms finally went silent. The station's emergency lights glowed a dull orange as everyone tried to calm their breathing. No one spoke for long minutes. The whole attack had taken less than 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Once they stabilized the injured, the researchers turned their focus to the drifting strike craft. They retrieved its wreckage with a remote drone. Examining it would hopefully give them answers. When the first panels were taken apart, a hush fell over the room. Inside the craft, several of its components carried unmistakable markings, patterns, alloys, and manufacturing designs that matched technology used by members of the Galactic Council. Not one species in particular, but a mix of pieces commonly found on Council-authorized equipment. It didn't make sense. The Council had never directly attacked a human station. They always maintained the appearance of fairness and diplomacy. Even when they disagreed with humanity's actions, they preferred political pressure. A secret armed strike was something entirely different. Something dangerous. The crew immediately recorded the evidence, secured the parts, and sent the data to Earth with a priority alert. Human command received the message faster than they expected, and within minutes, analysts were studying the images, scanning the components, and verifying their origin. The confirmation came quickly. The manufacturing marks were real. Someone within Council territory had built. The attack craft got the evidence sparked outrage across human leadership, though they kept that emotion contained behind closed doors. They knew releasing the information too soon could escalate the situation. But they also knew that the attack could not be ignored. At the same time, the Galactic Council scrambled when they learned what had happened. Several members panicked, whispering among themselves in private chambers. They denied authorizing any strike. Some insisted it was a malfunction. Some claimed it must have been a rogue engineer or an extremist group. Others pretended they knew nothing. But deep down, all of them understood the danger. They had been interfering with communication networks. They had been quietly trying to slow down humanity's growth. And now, an attack craft built with their own technology had targeted a human station. Even if they hadn't ordered the attack themselves, the responsibility still pointed toward them. And they knew humanity would not overlook it. The Council called an emergency meeting. Voices rose, some desperate, some angry, some afraid. They didn't want a conflict with Earth. They especially didn't want humans discovering the earlier sabotage. But it was too late. The attack had lit a spark that no one could turn off. Meanwhile, humans focused on the injured crew first. They sent rescue ships. They brought the researchers back home for treatment and safety. The damaged station was secured and placed under heavy watch. The technicians who survived described the attack with shaking voices, still trying to process how close they had come to losing everything. Their recordings were tough to watch: alarms blaring, sparks flying, the station trembling. The footage made its way into confidential files for high-ranking officials to review. Humanity's leadership held a long meeting of their own, going over every detail, every theory, every possibility. They didn't want to assume the Council was responsible, but the evidence was hard to ignore. If someone inside the Council had attacked them, then what else had been planned? How far did this sabotage really go? And how many more hidden threats were out there? As humans debated, more fragments from the wrecked craft arrived on Earth for deeper study. Engineers discovered that the guidance system had been programmed with a precise targeting pattern, specifically for the research station. This was not an accident. It wasn't a malfunction. Someone had deliberately sent the craft with a mission. That fact alone changed everything. For the first time, human leadership realized that they were no longer facing subtle political pressure. Someone had taken a dangerous step, crossing a line that had never been crossed before, and humanity could not ignore it. Quietly, Earth withdrew its representatives from all council talks. They didn't make a scene. They didn't shout accusations. They simply stepped away, signaling a shift that every species in the galaxy would soon notice. The Council reacted with shock. Pulling back human representatives meant something bigger was coming. It meant humanity no longer trusted the Council. And a human society that felt betrayed was something no one wanted to deal with. Word spread across star systems faster than the council could contain it. Rumors filled communication channels. Humans were attacked. Council is hiding something. Earth is preparing a response. Some worlds panicked. Some felt guilty. Others watched in silence, sensing the beginning of something far larger than anyone had planned. As for Earth, they didn't rush into action. They took careful steps. They studied the craft. They strengthened their borders. They monitored every council signal. And through it all, they remained calm, not weak, not frightened, just calm. Because calm wasn't the same as passive. Calm meant focus. Calm meant intention. Calm meant they were thinking about their next move. And soon, the rest of the galaxy would realize that the attack wasn't just a mistake. It was the moment that pushed humanity from quiet suspicion into a new resolve. Resolve that would reshape the balance of power across the stars. Word of the attack spread through human space like a quiet storm. It didn't explode in panic. It didn't spark riots or chaos. Instead, it spread in whispers, careful whispers, moving from station to station, from colony to colony, until almost every human settlement felt the same cold pressure in the air. People weren't terrified. They were alert, focused, curious. Humans had always reacted that way when pushed. They didn't freeze. They prepared. Human leadership met again and again. But this time, the mood inside those meetings was different. Everyone in the room understood that the situation had changed. The attack craft was proof that someone somewhere had crossed a dangerous line. And even if the council insisted they had nothing to do with it, the evidence said otherwise. Earth didn't want a war. Human history had enough scars from conflict. They didn't want another one, especially not one that could spread across star systems. But they also knew staying silent would only invite more secret strikes, more sabotage, more danger. So Earth made a decision. They would stand up not with rage, not with threats, but with strength, clarity, and honesty. The first thing humanity did was activate fleets that almost no one outside Earth knew existed. These fleets had been built in distant star systems, hidden behind quiet nebulae, or tucked away in regions that scanners rarely reached. They weren't meant to be used for conquering. They were built as safeguards, silent guardians waiting for the moment humanity might need them. When the activation signal reached those hidden regions, giant ship hangars opened like awakening metal beasts. Rows of deep space cruisers powered up after years of sleep. Their engines hummed to life. Pilots and crew boarded, many of them shocked that their quiet postings were suddenly active. These fleets moved out without flashing lights, without making noise, without showing off. They positioned themselves along human borders, ready but calm. Every crew member understood the same truth. This wasn't preparation for attack. It was preparation for protection. Meanwhile, Earth sent a message to the Galactic Council, not a threat, not an accusation, but a firm notice. They announced that humanity was withdrawing from all negotiations until the Council took responsibility for the attack and the sabotage. The message was polite. It was measured. But it carried a weight the Council could not ignore. The Council chambers erupted the moment the message arrived. Representatives spoke over each other, confused, panicked, trying to make sense of what Earth was doing. Some were truly afraid, believing humans were preparing for war. Others insisted humanity was trying to manipulate them. A few quietly admitted the truth that the Council had pushed too far, and now humanity was simply stepping back to defend itself. But before the Council could form a response, Earth made another move. They didn't accuse the Council publicly. Instead, they shared the evidence of the sabotage with every major star nation across the galaxy. Not in a dramatic broadcast, not in a public speech. They simply sent complete data files to each government privately, allowing each recipient to see the truth for themselves. Inside those files were recordings from the CN, damaged scientific station, internal images of the strike craft, manufacturing marks on its parts, and logs showing communication interference traced to council sectors. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't changed. It was raw fact. When the other star nations saw the evidence, the reaction was immediate. Many of them had already felt suspicious of the council. Some had experienced strange delays or missing shipments, but never had proof of sabotage. Now, seeing what had happened to humans, they started connecting patterns. Suddenly, the council found itself under pressure from every direction. Worlds they had once controlled through political influence began questioning everything. Some demanded investigations. Some demanded transparency. Others demanded that the council explain why a peaceful human research station had been attacked with council-built technology. The council tried to defend itself. They held emergency meetings. They claimed the craft was stolen or built by rogue engineers. But their explanations failed to convince anyone. The damage had already been done. And then Earth did something no one expected. Instead of using the moment to gain power, they offered support to smaller civilizations that had suffered under council pressure. They didn't send fleets to intimidate. They didn't demand loyalty. They simply said they were willing to work together, share information, and help those who felt mistreated. For many species, this gesture meant everything. They saw humanity not as conquerors, but as allies, strong, determined, but fair. Some worlds quietly reached out to Earth requesting dialogue. Others asked for help in reviewing their own communication systems. A few even offered friendship treaties. Humanity accepted each request with calm professionalism. No boasting. No pride. Just cooperation. But while humans were gaining respect across the galaxy, the Council felt its control slipping. And in desperation, they made a mistake, believing they needed to show strength or lose authority forever. They deployed a suppressive fleet to one of the smaller nations that had recently accepted help from Earth. The Council didn't attack them, but they positioned warships around the planet as a warning: stay loyal to the Council or face consequences. The moment the news reached Earth, every human leader felt the same quiet fire burn inside them. The Council wasn't just interfering with humans anymore. They were threatening innocent worlds to maintain power. That was something humanity could not stand by and watch. Earth's response came fast. A formation of human ships moved out, not from the borders, but from the hidden fleets that had been waiting silently. These ships were different from anything the galaxy had seen before. They had unusual shapes, unusual energy signatures, and systems that didn't match standard technology levels. They were built with human creativity, human stubbornness, and human refusal to accept limitations. The human fleet arrived near the threatened world without warning. The Council's suppressive ships panicked the moment they detected them. They expected a battle. They expected aggression. They expected humanity to strike with fury, but humans did not open fire. They simply positioned themselves between the Council fleet and the protected world, forming a barrier. The two sides faced each other in silent space. Then the humans activated a single demonstration shot. It wasn't a weapon aimed at any ship. It was a gravitational pulse-controlled, precise, and powerful. It expanded gently through space like a ripple on water. When it reached the Council ships, it didn't destroy them. It didn't explode. Instead, it disabled them. Their engines went dark. Their shields shut down. Their weapons powered off like candles blown out by a soft breath. The Council fleet was left drifting, unharmed but completely powerless. The message was clear. Humanity didn't want war. But humanity also wouldn't allow intimidation, not against themselves and not against anyone else. Across the galaxy, the incident spread in moments. Star nations whispered in shock. Some admired the humans. Some feared them. But everyone understood the same truth. Earth would stand firm. Earth would protect its allies. Earth would not be forced into silence. And through all of this, humans remained calm, steady, thoughtful, and collected. They didn't celebrate the victory. They didn't taunt the Council. They simply waited, watching to see what the Council would do next. It was the day humanity showed the galaxy that they were done being underestimated. They were done being treated as a young species to be controlled. They were done with silent sabotage. They were standing up with strength, with clarity, and with a determination that shook the balance of power across the stars. And the Galactic Council, for the first time in its long history, realized that they were up against a species that would not back down, not because they wanted power, but because they wanted fairness. The moment the Council's disabled ships drifted into silence, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Nothing exploded. Nothing burned. No battles broke out. But the quiet was louder than any weapon. Everyone watching either through long-range sensors or through secret reports understood that something had changed forever. The Council had expected humanity to respond with anger or aggression. They expected an attack they could use as proof that humans were dangerous. Instead, humanity had shown control, strength without cruelty, power without chaos. A single pulse had disabled a whole Council formation without hurting anyone. Even the frightened crews inside those ships felt confused relief. They expected destruction. Instead, they were simply floating, alive, unharmed, and powerless. And that was exactly the point. Humanity wanted the galaxy to see that they did not strike to destroy. They struck only to show that they would not bow. The Council tried to recover quickly, ordering more ships to move in, ships that stayed far from the human line, afraid of getting too close. But the smaller nation behind the human fleet felt hope for the first time in a long while. Their people watched from their surface, looking up at the bright points of light above, knowing the silhouettes shielding them were human. Some of the smaller nations had lived under the Council's pressure for decades. They were used to being told where their fleets could travel, what resources they could trade, what political choices they were allowed to make. They were used to being guided, which was just a softer word for controlled. But now, watching humans stand between them and the very organization that had kept them silent, they felt something new. Something they hadn't felt in generations. They felt protected. The Council knew they had made a mistake, but instead of stepping back, they pushed harder. Pride mixed with fear. They believed they had to regain control before the galaxy slipped from their hands entirely. They began issuing warnings. They accused Earth of breaking agreements. They threatened sanctions. They even attempted to claim that the attack on the human science station had been staged by humans themselves. But no one believed that the evidence humanity had shared earlier was too clear, too real, too detailed. Worlds across the galaxy had seen the truth with their own eyes. They had seen the attack craft marked with Council designs. They had watched the footage of humans pulling injured researchers from smoking corridors. They had read the logs that showed communication sabotage. These were not fabrications. The Council's lies only made them look weaker. Humanity, meanwhile, remained calm. They didn't answer the accusations. They didn't fall into the trap of shouting wars. Their fleet stayed exactly where they were, protecting, not provoking. But even though the humans stayed quiet, their silence carried strength. It reminded the galaxy that humans didn't need to boast. They showed their message through action. Inside the Council's biggest chamber, panic grew thicker with every passing hour. Representatives argued about how to respond. Some demanded the Council pull back and negotiate. Others insisted they double their fleets and show humanity they would not be intimidated. A few whispered that the real danger wasn't humans, but the Council itself, because the chain of mistakes had been too long, too messy, and too careless. Every voice was loud. Every fear was louder. Back on Earth, humans continued analyzing the wreckage of the attack craft. Their scientists discovered something new, a small device hidden deep inside the engine core, coded to erase its own navigation records. The only reason it hadn't erased anything was because the final blast during the attack had damaged the system before it activated. That detail alone revealed everything. The attack had been planned to leave no evidence behind. Council would have blamed pirates or unknown forces. Humanity would have been left with broken metal and injured crew, unable to prove anything. But fate had turned the Council's own plan against them. The malfunction, the rebound blast, and the damaged erasure unit had all exposed the truth. The more humanity uncovered, the more they realized the Council had grown comfortable in its own power. Comfortable enough to believe they would never be caught. This truth angered many humans, but the anger didn't show as rage. It showed as determination. So Earth made another choice. They would send a diplomatic message, firm but peaceful. They asked the Council to explain the sabotage, the attack, and the intimidation toward smaller species. They asked for responsibility, not revenge. They asked for dialogue, not conflict. Most importantly, they asked the Council to withdraw their suppressive fleet from the small nation they were threatening. The Council rejected the message within minutes. That rejection sealed their fate across human territory. Fleets that had been silent began to shift. They didn't move toward attack. They didn't challenge the Council directly. Instead, they positioned themselves near every major human ally. They blocked access routes, protected outer colonies, and placed themselves exactly where the Council would least want them. Even the small nations, inspired by Earth's bravery, began moving their own modest ships toward defensive positions. They weren't strong, but they weren't helpless either. Seeing humanity stand up for them made them stand up for themselves. The galaxy was changing. Inside the Council, some leaders finally realized the truth. They had lost control. And the more they pushed, the more the galaxy resisted. The Council's oldest members knew they couldn't win a confrontation with humanity. Humans weren't aggressive by nature, but they were relentless when pushed. And unlike the Council, humanity didn't depend on fear to gain influence. People trusted humans because they treated others fairly. The Council didn't have that trust, but still, there were leaders who refused to back down. They believed the Council had to show strength or fall apart. They ordered a new fleet to assemble deeper in Council space, a fleet far larger than the one humanity had just disabled. They were hoping the size alone would scare humans into retreat, but humans did not retreat. They didn't even move. When the massive Council fleet finally emerged into open space, ready to intimidate, they were met by a surprising sight. Human fleets were already waiting, but not in attack formation. They formed a calm defensive pattern, spaced evenly, stable like stones in a river. Their engines glowed softly. Their weapons remained offline. Their shields were active, but not raised for battle. The message was quiet, but powerful. We are not afraid. We will not attack, but we will not back down. Some Council commanders hesitated. They could feel it in their chests, that uncomfortable truth that humans weren't bluffing. They weren't charging forward, yet they radiated a pressure stronger than any weapon. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hate. It was steady resolve. Humanity stood there like a wall no storm could break. And then, just like before, the humans performed another demonstration. A gentle one, carefully controlled, just strong enough to make its point. A human ship activated a vertical shock pulse, sending a clean wave across space. The wave brushed against the massive Council fleet, and every single ship felt it. Their shields flickered. Their engines stuttered for a second. Their navigation screens glowed white before resetting. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was harmed. But every ship knew it. The humans could have pushed harder. They didn't. They were showing restraint, not weakness. The Council fleet froze in place. None of their commanders dared to give the order to advance. Fear mixed with respect. They finally understood why so many smaller nations had decided to trust humans. Humans didn't dominate. They defended. Humans didn't threaten. They warned. Humans didn't seek power. They sought fairness. And fairness was something the Council had long forgotten. Back on Earth, people watched the long-range feeds, feeling pride, worry, hope, and determination all at once. They knew they weren't the most powerful species in the universe. But they always had something the Council had never understood: unity, compassion, and the stubborn courage to stand up, even when standing meant standing alone. But they weren't alone anymore. Smaller nations sent messages of support. Some offered their fleets to join the human line. Others sent supplies, engineers, or intelligence. For the first time in ages, the galaxy wasn't divided by fear. It was connected through a shared desire for fairness, and humanity was the spark that lit that change. Meanwhile, the Council faced the truth they had tried to avoid. Their attempts to control the galaxy had led them into a corner from which they could not escape. And the force that cornered them wasn't human aggression. It was human integrity. That was the moment the Council finally understood that the galaxy had changed forever, and Earth was at its center. When the conflict finally calmed across the stars, a strange silence settled over the galaxy. It was not the silence of fear anymore, but the quiet that comes after a long storm. People across distant worlds were watching, waiting, and wondering what Earth would do next. For a long time, many believed humans would use their strength to dominate others, but something very different was happening. Instead of pushing their power, humans were trying to build a new beginning. They understood that strength meant nothing if it was used the wrong way. And after everything the Council had done, Earth knew the galaxy needed something better than fear to move forward. It started with a simple request from Earth's representatives. They asked the Council to broadcast a meeting publicly. At first, the Council refused. They didn't want their mistakes to be exposed so openly. But the pressure was too strong. Member species were already questioning them, and more worlds were asking for answers. They could not hide the truth any longer. The broadcast was finally agreed upon, and billions tuned in from every corner of the galaxy. When the broadcast began, many expected Earth to arrive with a threatening tone or harsh demands. But the humans who stepped forward spoke calmly. They didn't raise their voices or make bold claims. They simply explained everything that had happened, and they did it with a kind of honesty that left the galaxy stunned. They showed the evidence of sabotage, the proof of the attack on the science station, and the intercepted messages from Council officials trying to hide their involvement. They even showed the messages they had sent earlier, asking for peaceful talks that were ignored. The Council leaders looked uncomfortable throughout the broadcast. They knew they were caught, and there was no avoiding responsibility. For the first time in their history, they offered a public apology. It was brief, awkward, and clearly difficult for them, but it was still something no one had expected. And when it ended, the galaxy felt the shift. This apology was not about saving themselves. It was about admitting that Earth had been right all along, but Earth didn't stop there. They knew words meant nothing unless actions followed. So they presented a new idea framework that would replace the old power structure that had ruled the galaxy for generations. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was something new, something fair, and something built on the belief that no single species should hold unchecked power over others. The framework focused on three things. The first was equal voice, meaning every world, no matter how weak or strong, would have a say in decisions. The second was sovereignty, which meant no world could interfere in another's affairs without agreement. And the third was mutual defense, so if any world was attacked or threatened, all others would come together to protect it. Many species were surprised by how simple the proposal was. Even more surprising was the fact that Earth wasn't claiming leadership or special rights for themselves. They weren't trying to take over the galaxy. They were trying to fix it. Some worlds doubted the plan at first. They wondered why Earth, after proving such incredible strength, was choosing a peaceful role instead of a dominant one. But as more leaders spoke to human representatives and saw their sincerity, doubt slowly faded. It became clear that Earth understood the cost of war, the value of cooperation, and the responsibility that came with power. One of the most powerful moments happened when a representative from a small world approached the humans privately. His people had been under council pressure for decades, always pushed aside and never allowed to grow. He told the humans that his world would never forget what Earth had done. Not because Earth fought back, but because Earth stood up for justice without demanding anything in return. That sentiment echoed across dozens of planets, and in the following weeks, more worlds stepped forward to support Earth's vision. As the new interstellar charter was drafted, humans worked closely with species from every region. The discussions were long and sometimes frustrating, but there was a human patience behind every debate. They didn't dismiss concerns, didn't rush decisions, and didn't treat anyone as lesser. This approach created trust, something the galaxy had been missing for a long time. While all of this was happening, the Council was undergoing its own transformation. The old members who had abused their power stepped down or were removed by their own people. New representatives were elected, ones who wanted cooperation instead of control. This was the first time the Council changed so dramatically, and everyone knew it was because of Earth's involvement. Throughout the process, humans continued offering help to the worlds that had been harmed. They sent engineers to rebuild damaged stations, medics to treat injured civilians, and researchers to repair the communication network that had been secretly tampered with. But they didn't demand payment or political loyalty. They simply said it was the right thing to do. This made the galaxy see humans in a new light. No longer were they the unpredictable species some had feared. They were now the species that many trusted the most. News reports from distant systems began describing Earth as a stabilizing force. Some even called humans the protectors of balance. Earth didn't encourage these titles, but they didn't reject them either. They understood that the galaxy needed hope, and if humans could represent that hope, then it was worth carrying the responsibility. Months passed, and the galaxy slowly regained its rhythm. Trade lanes opened again, diplomacy became active, and old tensions eased. For the first time in years, there was optimism spreading from world to world. Peace wasn't guaranteed, but it felt possible. And that was more than anyone had expected. Eventually, the time came to sign the new interstellar charter. The ceremony took place in a large orbital hall floating between several major systems, so no single planet would feel favored. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered. Some arrived in small ships, some in massive cruisers, and some in simple transports. But inside the hall, everyone stood as equals. When Earth's representatives entered, the entire room rose. It wasn't planned, it happened naturally. Species from all backgrounds looked at the humans with gratitude and respect. Even the newly reformed council members stood. This was the galaxy's way of saying thank you. Not for power, not for victory, but for fairness. The ceremony lasted for hours as each world added their mark to the charter. When Earth's turn came, silence fell across the hall. The human representative pressed their hand against the signing plate, leaving the emblem of Earth glowing beside hundreds of others. It was a powerful moment, one that symbolized unity more than anything else. After the signing, something unexpected happened. The new council head approached the humans and publicly stated that Earth had changed the course of galactic history, not by force alone, but by teaching the galaxy what justice truly meant. It was one of the most honest acknowledgments ever spoken in such a setting. By the end of the day, everyone knew a new era had begun. The galaxy wasn't perfect, and challenges would always come. But now, there was a system built on fairness and cooperation. And the species that once stood on the edge of conflict were now working together. Back on Earth, people watched the broadcast with mixed emotions. Some felt proud, some relieved, and some simply hopeful for what would come next. They knew the journey wasn't over. Being part of a galaxy meant more responsibilities, more struggles, and more moments where they would need to stand up for what was right. But they were ready. They had shown the galaxy their strength, not through destruction, but through their desire to protect and uplift. In the end, everyone across the stars came to understand the same truth. Earth's fury had shaken the galaxy, but not in the way many first feared. It shook the stars by forcing the truth into the open. It shook the stars by defending the weak. It shook the stars by refusing to let injustice rule. And most of all, it shook the stars by proving that true power is not in the ability to break things, but in the courage to build something better. And because of that, the galaxy would remember Earth for generations, not as conquerors, but as guardians of fairness in a vast and complicated universe.